Good morning. Hope you're all doing well. This is a purple sweet potato pie. This is what I had for breakfast, and my wife made 3 of them. And so we ate the first one the last day or two, working on number 2, number 3 in the fridge. And they're really good. It's purple sweet potatoes, good whole grain crust, a few dates. It is just the best food in the world. My wife, I happen to marry the best cook. God arranged that every man can have the best wife and the best cook. So I have it. And it's a challenge to look back at some of the difficult times in the beginning, but see how God has led us up to this point, and then that brings rejoicing into my heart. You know, in the early years of my life, got involved in a lot of things, you know, that I should not have done. And flattening the neighbor's tires, robbing the Coke machine at the church next door, just little crimes. The problem is, little crimes often grow into big crimes. And as I got older, as I got out of elementary school, went into high school, kind of got a little more involved in criminal things. Then the Army, then into the workplace when I got out of the Army. And it was little by little I was getting up to my ears into things that weren't legal. And as I look back, I just see God's mercy in that I didn't end up in the penitentiary long term. I got put in jail once, got caught, put in jail, but very, very short time there. Got probation when I went to court. But you know, that was my life. And then when I started reading the Bible, I hit Matthew 25. Now, I'm reading the Bible, I'm a Christian, and that's the old way of life. I don't even, I have no desire to go back to that kind of life. I've left it. I'm reading the Bible. I hit Matthew 25, verse 15. He gave some men 5 talents. He gave some 2. He gave some 1. And I realize what I'm reading. I'm understanding that God has given us certain abilities, certain gifts, that we can serve Him as we try to share the gospel, as we live in peace at home with each other. But then in verse 19, it kind of troubled me when I read verse 19. It said, when the Lord returns, He's going to reckon with His servant and ask, what kind of use did you make of the talent I gave you? What did you do with the talent I gave you? Now, when you read that, with my kind of history, I'm thinking about the prodigal son. He not only wasted his substance, he wasted his life. And I had wasted the first 35 years of my life. And when the Lord comes back, He's going to reckon with me. What did you do with life? Life is the most precious of gifts. Without that, the rest doesn't matter. He gives all of us life, and everybody has that gift. He gave me life. What did I do with the 35 years that He entrusted to me? And He's going to reckon with me. And that kind of scared me a little bit, because I thought when the Lord asked me what I've done with my first 3.5 decades, what kind of answer am I going to be able to give Him? Now, as I'm reading through the Bible, in Exodus 22, it's verse 1, it talks about this subject that I didn't really know anything about. If you steal a sheep, you pay back 4. Okay, it's 4 for 1. So I kind of think if you steal $1, you pay back 4. Then 2 Samuel 12, verse 6 is when Nathan comes with the parable, and David's going to pass judgment. He's really passing judgment on himself, but he doesn't know that yet, because Nathan's about to say, "Thou art the man." But before he does, David passes judgment, and he says he needs the man that stole the sheep, he needs to restore fourfold. That's an agreement with Exodus 22:1. And then I got to Luke 19. It's verse 8. But before that is Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was a wee little man. A wee little man was he. Climbed up in the sycamore tree. The Lord, he wanted to see that little children's song. And as the Lord was passing by, he looked up in the tree and he said, "Zacchaeus?" It surprised Zacchaeus, right? First name basis with the Lord. The Lord knows everybody, knows everybody's first name. "Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house today." And then Zacchaeus begins to share how if he's hooked and crooked anybody, and he says it in verse 8, he paid back 4-fold. And so that's starting to, sound in my mind, It's pay back 4-fold. And then I had the thought, if I'm going to be required to make restitution, and restitution is a Bible doctrine. If I'm going to be required to make restitution, I'm going to have to get a job at Walmart, work 10,000 years to pay back everybody. And I didn't know what to do. I was a little concerned. And what I decided to do, I think the Lord led in this. I said, well, Lord, I prayed and I made an agreement. I said, Lord, I've stolen a lot of things. I've done a lot of wrong, and I don't know how to make it right. But I want to make restitution. If you can help me to see if there's anything I need to make right, I'll do it. If I need to right or wrong, I'll do it. Help me to see it, and I'll do it. That was the agreement. The very next day, my truck broke down the mountain. And by the way, that's the same truck that I brought back home, had towed back home, and the Lord did a miracle in helping me fix that truck. I think that was in a past something I shared in my testimony. I was walking up the mountain. It was Lookout Mountain. It's a long grade going up the mountain. On top, there's a huge community up there. It's a long kind of an ascent up the mountain, but I'm walking up. Of course, I'm hitchhiking. Now, at that time, I had long hair, ponytail, looked like a hippie, and I looked kind of rough. I looked kind of wild. Try to put a picture of that in here. But as I'm walking up the mountain, I got my thumb out. I'm hitchhiking. And I'm hitchhiking up the mountain, and a car is driving down the mountain. And as the man drives down the mountain, he's driving a gray station wagon. It's the spring. His window is open on the passenger side. He glances at me. I look right at him. And I thought, that's the man I robbed in Atlanta. And then his brake lights went on. He turned around, came back, stopped, and offered me a ride. That's what he said. Do you need a ride? I said, and I'm looking at him. Now, he didn't know that I'd robbed him. I knew, but he didn't know. It was in Atlanta. I'm now living in Minton, Alabama. That's a good 2-hour drive from Atlanta, where I used to live. And I had robbed him in Atlanta, robbed his business, Peachtree Street. And he didn't know it. We'd say clean getaway. And I said, yeah, I need a ride. He said, hop in. And I got into the station wagon with him. And as we're going up the mountain, I asked him, I said, well, where are you from? You visiting? He said, no, I moved up here from Atlanta. I thought, you really? He said, where are you going? I said, home. I didn't tell him I'd moved here from Atlanta too, but I had. I said, I'm going to home. I just live down the highway here a little bit. He said, I'll take you. So he took me home. And as we were driving home, he told me he'd moved from Atlanta, had bought a business down here, a little bed and breakfast inn called Nippersink Lodge. And then he asked me if I needed a job. Now, Darlene was pregnant. We didn't have a lot of money. And I said, yeah, I could use a job. He said, would you wash the windows? I need all the windows in my bed and breakfast inn washed up before I open up the spring here. He said, do you know where Nippersink Lodge is? And I said, well, sure. I drive my bicycle by there. I go down, swim in a little river. I know just where it is. He said, can you come at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning? I said, yes. I showed up at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I get some paper towels, some Windex, and I start washing. And the Lord starts speaking to my heart. Isaiah 30:21, you'll hear a word behind you saying, this is the way. I heard the word of the Lord behind me saying, and that's the man, we got a deal. I have arranged to put you in his company. You robbed that man in Atlanta. You need to make it right. I couldn't believe it. No, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what was transpiring. And that was my evidence, one of the strongest early evidences that I ever had that God was real and had a concern in my own personal life. The 10:30 of Matthew, even the hairs on your head are numbered. And I was washing windows all day and thinking, I can't tell this man that I robbed him. Statute of limitations hasn't run out. He could call the police, have me put in jail. I can't tell that man I robbed him. And at the end of the day, about 5 o'clock, He came out and he said, "You haven't finished." I said, "Oh, no, it's a lot of windows." He said, "Can you come back tomorrow and finish?" I said, "Yeah." Came back the next day, started at 8 o'clock, and the Lord is on my shoulder like with the trumpet of a voice. That's got 1 Thessalonians 4:16. When he comes, he's got the trump of God, right? He is blowing the trumpet in my ear in Nippersink Lodge, and the voice is saying, "You need to tell him. You made an agreement. Now you need to set it right." And that morning I washed the windows, finished up about noon, and he's coming out to pay me. He looked around, said, "Hey, they look good," and he pulls his money out. Now, he was giving me, I worked 12 hours back then. This is a long time ago. This is I don't know, from decades ago. He gave me $8 an hour. I'll never forget, because he said, you work 12 hours, 8 times 12 is 96. And he has his money out, and he's peeling off $96. And the Lord is behind me saying, "Now this is the time. You need to tell him, and you need to tell him now." And as he hands me the money, I just sit there, I guess all sheepish looking and grinning. I don't know what to say. And I said, "Mr. Disney, I can't take the money." And that kind of puzzled him, right? It puzzled him. I said, "I can't take your money." I said, "I need to share something with you." "Okay." And I said, "Remember the business you had on Peachtree Street, Atlanta Photo?" And now when I said that, that got his attention. And here's some hippie he picked up on the highway washing his windows, and he's telling him about his business he had in Atlanta. And then when I told him I'd robbed him, he really looked shocked. And I explained to him, I said, "Mr. Disney, my life has been changed. I have found the Lord, and he has changed my life. I'm sorry for what I've done. I'm not trying to pay for my sin, but I'm not going to take your money." And I said, "I'm sorry." Friends, when I finished that video, I thought, I need to go back and put an ending on it, an epilogue, because I didn't really tell the rest of the story. When I refused to take that money from Mr. Disney, he became very adamant. He insisted that he pay me, and I took it. And then he offered me a job, and I took it. So Darlene did too. Darlene and I worked at Nippersink Lodge next 2 summers as part of the housekeeping staff, and became friends with Mr. and Mrs. Disney. Very, very precious folks. You know, he told me later, he said, "Look, you had no reason to share that with me, about me robbing his business here in Atlanta. You had no reason to share that with me unless something has really changed in your life." And we became friends. I began to pray for him. And this was my first experience in praying for somebody outside the family circle. And the question arises, how can you pray to a God you've never seen in a place you've never been and expect that prayer, hope that prayer will change your life and the life of those around you? Well, friends, I can't fathom all the mysteries in the Bible, but I believe what it said, and I believe it has some kind of influence on the people around me, and maybe a reflex action on myself too. So Nippersink is closed. When I was up there last year, went by, there was a big for sale sign up on the lodge. Of course, Mr. Disney passed into the grave, and prayed for him until the day he died. So my dear friends, may the Lord continue to bless and direct in your life. And again, that lesson for me, as the Lord took my life and gave me experiences that would help me to know that he's real, he's interested, he's a providential God. May he give you those same experiences today.